After the end of my marriage, I found myself replaying every moment that led to its collapse. What struck me most wasn't just the pain of separation, but how swiftly my ex-wife had remarried. It was as if our years together had vanished overnight. I remember the first time I saw her after the divorce. She was practically glowing as she talked about her new husband. There was a certain enthusiasm in her voice, as if she had finally found the happiness she claimed was missing with me. And although I smiled politely and wished her well, inside, I felt a mix of betrayal and disbelief. How could she move on so easily, while I was still trying to piece myself back together? I began to reflect on where it had all started. I met Evelyn at my aunt's house. She had come over for a small family gathering. At first, she didn't leave much of an impression on me. Yes, she was attractive, tall, well-spoken with a warm smile, but beyond that, I didn't think much of her. We exchanged a few polite words that evening, and that was it. I went home thinking nothing of it. But fate, as always, had other plans. Over the next few months, I ran into her more frequently during visits to my aunt's house. Slowly, our interactions became longer, more comfortable. We started talking about books, travel, the kind of music we liked. I began to look forward to seeing her. She had this way of asking questions that made me feel like she genuinely wanted to understand who I was. Not just on the surface, but the deeper layers too. Eventually, our connection turned into something more. It wasn't rushed or impulsive. It felt mature, deliberate, and built on a solid foundation of understanding and trust, or so I thought. After a couple of years of dating, we decided to get married. We believed that the slow, thoughtful nature of our relationship was what would make our marriage last. We weren't two people swept up by passion. We were partners who had built something real, one conversation at a time. Things were good in the beginning. We laughed often, cooked dinner together, and took long walks discussing future plans. But life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges at you. I got offered a new job that promised a better salary and opportunities for growth, something we both thought would help us build the future we dreamed of. The only catch was the travel. I was away from home a lot. First, Evelyn was understanding. She said she was proud of me. But over time, that understanding turned into frustration. She started to feel lonely, left out of the picture. I did my best to stay connected. Late-night phone calls, surprise gifts delivered when I was away, handwritten letters tucked into her books, but it wasn't enough. The warmth between us began to cool. Conversations became shorter, filled with passive-aggressive remarks and long silences. Then came the accusations. She started questioning where I was, who I was with, and why I didn't answer her calls immediately. At first, I tried to reassure her, but the trust that had once felt so natural was clearly eroding. One evening, after returning from a week-long trip, I noticed something different. There was a distance in her eyes I couldn't ignore. A few weeks later, the truth came out. Evelyn had been seeing someone else. She didn't deny it. In fact, she told me as if she were the victim, blaming my absence and emotional unavailability for her decision. She said she had needs I wasn't fulfilling, that she had been feeling neglected for too long. Her words stung, not just because of the betrayal, but because it felt like all the effort I had put in, every sacrifice I had made, had meant nothing to her. The divorce that followed was exhausting. Not just the legal process, but the emotional weight of it all. While I was struggling to process everything, Evelyn seemed to breeze through it. She moved out, found a new apartment, and just moved on. I couldn't understand how she could detach so easily, how she could so quickly fall into a new life while I was still grieving the end of the one we had built together. In the months that followed, I did a lot of soul-searching. I realized that love isn't always enough if the other person isn't truly committed. I had tried to make things work, had sacrificed time and energy for our future, but you can't make someone stay who has already decided to leave. I couldn't continue blaming myself for her choices. Yes, I had my faults, but infidelity was a decision she made on her own. I had to accept that I hadn't truly lost someone who was ever fully invested in the first place. And so, I chose to stop looking back. I stopped checking her social media, stopped wondering what could have been. Instead, I began focusing on myself. I started therapy, spent more time with friends, picked up old hobbies I had let go of during our marriage. I learned to enjoy my own company again. I made a conscious decision not to jump into another relationship right away. I needed to understand who I was without the weight of a broken marriage holding me down. This journey wasn't easy, but it taught me some of the most important lessons of my life. That peace is worth more than forced companionship, that healing takes time, and that it's okay to walk away from someone, even if you once loved them deeply, when staying only leads to hurt. Now, when I think about Evelyn and how quickly she remarried, I no longer feel that familiar sting. I see it for what it was, a reminder that not every loss is truly a loss. Sometimes, it's the beginning of something better, something more honest, something that starts with me. As time passed, I came to terms with the quiet in my home, the absence of footsteps, the unused side of the bed, the dinners for one. In the beginning, the silence was deafening. It reminded me of what was gone. But eventually, that same silence became peaceful. It gave me space to think, to reflect, to rebuild. I no longer had to defend my choices, no longer had to walk on eggshells to avoid conflict. I was no longer responsible for someone else's unhappiness. That weight was gone. I used that time to rediscover myself. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since college. I poured out my frustrations, my regrets, my anger, and eventually my hopes. I reconnected with old friends I had unintentionally drifted away from during my marriage. They reminded me of who I used to be, of my sense of humor, my adventurous spirit, my resilience. I traveled alone for the first time in years, taking a road trip with no real destination in mind. Just me, the open road, and my thoughts. It was liberating. Professionally, I threw myself into my work, not as an escape, but as a challenge I wanted to conquer. I earned a promotion, not because I was trying to prove something to Evelyn or anyone else, but because I believed in my own capability again. The same job that once strained my relationship became the foundation of my financial and personal stability. Eventually, the anger faded. I stopped needing explanations for what had happened. I stopped replaying the arguments and second-guessing my actions. I accepted that sometimes people grow in different directions, and sometimes love isn't enough to hold a relationship together. Most importantly, I realized that Evelyn's actions, though painful, were a reflection of her own values and needs, not my failures. There were moments of loneliness, of course. Nights when I wished I had someone to talk to, someone to share little victories with. But I didn't rush to fill that void. I knew that jumping into another relationship just to avoid being alone would only lead me back into a similar cycle. I wanted more. I wanted authenticity, mutual respect, and real connection. In time, I learned to be comfortable with solitude. I found joy in simple things: a cup of coffee in the morning sun, a good book that kept me up too late, the freedom to make spontaneous decisions without checking in with anyone. I became my own source of peace, and that realization changed everything. Looking back now, I no longer see my divorce as a failure. I see it as a redirection, a painful but necessary step toward becoming a better version of myself. It forced me to confront truths I had ignored, to accept the end of something I had once cherished, and to choose myself for the first time in a long time. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe love will find me again, maybe it won't. But either way, I'm not afraid of the unknown anymore. I've survived heartbreak, betrayal, and loneliness, and I came out stronger, more grounded, more whole. And if there's one thing I know for certain, it's this. The best thing I ever did was stop chasing someone who had already let go and start embracing the person I was becoming without them.